Today I will be talking about HTML5 games, about their cons, about how HTML5 games differ, HTML5 canvas games differ from DOM elements games, and I will talk a little about not all the, but some of the frameworks and engines that help us to make HTML5 games, and in the end we will make just a small game. Just the basics. But I would like to introduce myself first. I am Arsen. As a kid, I was always dreaming of having my own computer, and in a way that nobody would tell me how much to sit in front of it and would put no limits for that. But I was not dreaming it this way. And right now I'm working as a marketing creatives developer at Playrix. A little about Playrix, for those who don't know. It was founded in 2004. The headquarters is in Dublin. Playrix is one of the top 3 companies in mobile game development, in mobile game industry. It has more than 100 million monthly active users, and also it has more than 3,500 employees in more than 35 countries. And now I want to ask everyone, what is a game? Can anyone say? Okay, I will give when you Google what is a game, it comes with this definition. Game is an activity that one engages in for amusement or fun. Of course, some games include more than only amusement and fun. Some games are also educational. They tell some story or something else, but this is the basic definition for the game. Well, I want to tell you that in Armenia we have game developers community, and this year a game conference was held in Armenia, and you can check the talks by scanning this QR. Just to let you know, this QR will open a YouTube link where you can see the talks from this year's game conference. Now, another question. Who remembers this website? Yeah, lots of you, I guess. And who remembers specifically these games? Yeah. Yeah, brings back memories, right? Well, I want to tell you just a little story. One day after a presentation where I talked about games and I mentioned about this game, Fireboy and Water Girl, a girl approached me and said that he and her boyfriend agreed on marrying after completing this game, which of course they did. Now, these games were made using Adobe Flash, but since December 2020, Adobe Flash is not being supported anymore. Why? Even though in the beginning of the 2000s, Adobe Flash was the rock star, it was almost everywhere, and even the YouTube player was made with Adobe Flash. It had some security issues, and we had to install the plugin in order to use it. And it turned out that HTML5 was a much better alternative. And because of all these reasons and some other reasons as well, Apple decided that its devices will not be supporting it. So, about the cons of HTML5 games. HTML5 games are cross-platform, which means that you can write one code, and if the operating system has access to the web view, aka browser, it can open the games. And with tools such as Cordova and Electron.js, we can export HTML5 games for various platforms. And of course, HTML5 games are way faster than Flash games. They are also way lighter. Just for the fact, you can see that the empty bundle of Pixie.js, Phaser3, and 3.js is 1 megabytes or less. These are three of the most popular game engines and frameworks. And I want to tell you that this 1 megabytes or 770 kilobytes includes all the tools that you can make games. But Unity can export WebGL games as well. But the minimal size of the Unity WebGL export is more than 3 megabytes. And it has absolutely nothing in it. It doesn't even has a camera to render anything. But you may think that 3 megabytes is not that big. Well, just for the fact, the smaller the better. Playable ads must be between the size 2 to 5 megabytes. Please raise your hands if you play games on your mobile device. Okay, lots of people. Have you ever seen ads that you can play while you are watching it? Yeah, I can see. These ads are called playable ads. They are interactive, and from the marketing view, they are really good. But since ads cannot be very big, because we need to load them and show them, they must be sized between 2 to 5 megabytes. It depends on the platform. And because of the smaller size, the loading size is smaller. And using that advantages, there are some various platforms like GameyBot on Telegram, GameSnacks from Google, Yandex Games, obviously from Yandex, and Crazy Games, and many other platforms that include HTML5 games in them. For example, you can download only one app, which is Yandex Games. You can open it, and you will have access to thousands of different HTML5 games. You don't need to download anything else. You just click, open the game, which due to its smaller size will open like in 10 seconds. And you can play the game, you can close the game, and you can go switch to another game. So in order to play like thousands of games, you will need only one app. These are the advantages of platforms for HTML5 games. Now, ask yourself again, is 3 megabytes that big? Because if the games were like 500 megabytes each in those platforms, it will take like 10 minutes to download the game and so you can play it. And also one of the cons of HTML5 games is that you don't need any additional plugins, unlike Flash. So the main ways of making HTML5 games is making games with DOM elements and with HTML5 canvas. In order to make games with DOM elements, you need to have the knowledge of HTML elements, CSS, and JavaScript. Well, you need the HTML elements, divs, buttons, and other things to make all the visuals in your game, and you need the CSS to style it, and you need JavaScript in order to make it interactive. But in Canvas games, you use only Canvas element from HTML5, and you need only JavaScript. All the styling, everything else is done in JavaScript. And in the end, I will show you how. So, which one to choose, DOM games or Canvas games? Actually, it depends on your goals. There are some games that are better be made with DOM elements, and some other games are better be made with Canvas. Canvas has advantages in terms of performance, in terms of animation, and low-level graphics manipulation. Also, there are some other tools that can help you to achieve more in your Canvas games. Also, there is an Armenian hackerspace called GeekerAM. There you can find various talks and tutorials and other things in Armenian. And one of the people that mentioned there is Arlen, who will have a talk also today. We're standing right there. Well, today he will talk about the power of mathematics in JavaScript. And in the GeekersAM you can find him talking showing you how you can make games only with Canvas API. But today I will be talking about engines and frameworks. As I mentioned, Pixie.js, Phaser, and Three.js are three of the popular game engines and frameworks for JavaScript. They all good, and they all have their strong sides and weak sides. But Pixie.js's strong sides are faster performance, good sprite animation, and rich feature set. Because Pixie.js is more concentrated on rendering other than being a game engine. But Phaser 3 is more like a game engine, and it has all the tools for mobile development support. It has really powerful physics engine, and it also has advanced rendering. And Three.js is used for 3D rendering, and it has advanced lighting. It has advanced lighting and advanced textures, and also it supports post-processing. So again, which one to choose? And again, it depends on the game you want to make. As I mentioned, Three.js is for 3D rendering. So if you want to make a 3D game, you better use Three.js. If you want to make a 2D game, you better choose between Phaser and Pixie. And which one to choose between Pixie and Phaser? It goes a little more deeper, but I will just skip that for today. Here are some game examples made with different tools, but I will come back to this slide at the end of the presentation if we have enough time. And now let's dive into Phaser 3. Why Phaser 3? Because it's one of the best game engines for web using JavaScript, and games made in Phaser 3 can be accessed in different platforms. Since it's a game engine, it has lots of tools and lots of things that will help you in your game development. Now, for starting your development, for making your game with Phaser 3, you need some tools and some knowledge. Of course, the first tool is the code editor, or where else you're going to write your code. And you need some JavaScript knowledge, and the more you have it, the better for you. We need a local web server because we don't want to have coarse error while loading our images. We need to have browser just to open it and test it. And we will need to load Phaser, and today we'll use GSDeliver for that. So, the game structure. Everything has a structure. Like, please raise your hand if you have experience with writing HTML. Okay, so you can tell that, you can agree that there is a body in HTML, and inside of that you write some elements, and inside of that you write some other elements, and like that. But the main thing is that everything you write inside of the body can be visible. So, there is some structure in the Phaser as well. We have the game, which is one, and we can have multiple scenes, and every scene can have different game objects in it. And we can also have this game object called container, which can also have different game objects in it. So, as you can see, I wrote the image and sprite. The difference between image and sprite is that if you want to render a static image, you better use image, and if you want to animate it or do some other things with that, you better use sprite. Now, let's go back to the top. What does the game do? A game controls the renderer. There is only one instance of the renderer, and which structures all the calls to the GPU or the CPU. And it also controls the animation manager so that we won't have to copy all the animation data from one scene to other scene. And also it controls the cache and some other things, but these three are the most important for now. In summary, Phaser game object is the core of the Phaser 3 game. It's responsible for setting up and managing the game environment, handling events, and providing access to various systems. Well, what about the scenes? You can think of scene as almost entirely self-contained game world. And they manage their own input, twins, game objects, display list, and other things. Thanks. Well, first of all, in order to start our game with Phaser, the first step is to create an HTML5 index HTML file and with the minimal JavaScript code in it. This is what the minimal JavaScript code looks like. And then we need to add the Phaser 3 CDN link to it. As I mentioned, we will use JS Deliver, and what is the CDN, aka Content Delivery Network? Just please Google that and expand your knowledge if you don't know anything about that. Well, if you open the JS Deliver and you search for Phaser 3, it will give you the link which we need to pass into the head of the HTML. So now we have access to Phaser. In the body, we need to add script tag in which we will put some code. Okay, first of all, let's start with the config. Thanks. So the first property in the config object is the type. You can see that I put Phaser Auto. We have three options: Phaser Auto, Phaser Canvas, or Phaser WebGL. It chooses the renderer, which will be used for the game. If we put Phaser Auto, it will choose automatically depending on the hardware. The width of the height is just really easy to understand. That's the width of the height, width and the height of the canvas, and the scene will be the scene that we give it. In this case, we will make a scene a little above, which will be called game. And as soon as the window, our page loads, we will assign our game variable a new Phaser game with all the config that we just mentioned. Once the Phaser game object has been created, it can be used to create and switch between different scenes to access the game input, sound, and other things. So, the scene lifecycle. That's one of the most important things that you need to understand. There are four main functions for the scene: init, preload, create, and update. So the first of all, init function is being called, because this is where you can set up parameters for your scene or game. After the init function is completed, the preload function is being called, which is good night, Eric. I'm sorry. Okay, in the preload function is designated to loading assets and images into memory before launching the actual game. And after all the loading is complete, a create function is being called, which is a great one-time execution that gives us a good place to create the main entities for our game. And after the create function is complete, with every frame update, the update function is being called. As soon while the scene is running, the update function will always be called. Have you heard of the animation frame? Animation frame function. Have you heard of the request animation frame function in JavaScript? Okay, a few of you. Well, it, depending on your on the frequency of your screen update, it calls any function with every frame update. And this is kind of what the update function does. And let's add the corresponding methods to our scene. Here we can see that I've put the just simple logs into init, preload, create, and update functions. And as I've told earlier, the result is obvious because, as I've told earlier, the init function will be called first, then the preload will be called, then create, and after that, with every frame update, the update function will be called. Now let's add an image to our game. I chose the phaser logo, just I had no creativity. And we will need a live server or a local server in order to load images because we don't want to have the coarse error. For that, I will use the live server for now, but if you haven't heard of coarse error, please just Google that or join the Armenian community of JavaScript developers and ask us, we will tell you. Okay, now let's load the image. As I've told, the preload function is a really good place in order to load images or different files. Here, as the second argument, we pass the URL for our image, and as the first argument, we give a key which later we'll use to access that image. And I've put just a callback function on progress event, because every time when any progress is being done on loading images, in the console we will see how much progress we have. As in the console, when it starts, it shows 0, and after it's completed, it shows 1. We have only one image, so it goes from 0 to 1. If we had two images, it would go from 0 to 0.5, then to 1. Then we loaded the image. Now let's add the image into the game. For that, let's create a variable called logo, and in the create function, let's assign the logo variable an image. This function, this is the scene, and in this scene we are adding image in the 300 with the position 300 as x in x axis and 200 in y axis, and we use the key to access the image. And this function returns us the image object which we assign to our logo variable. Now we have the image. But let's agree it's a little too big for our canvas, and yeah, that's an actual screenshot of the canvas. Now let's scale down the image. For that, we will use the function setScale. We call the setScale on the logo, and we pass 0.5, which means that the scale will be down to 0.5, from 1 to 0.5. We can pass two arguments if we want to change the x differently and y differently. If we pass one argument, both change in the same way. Now the image is smaller. But it's just a static image. Let's now move the image. As update function is being called with every frame update, with every frame update, let's add 2 pixels to the x position of our logo. Now we will see that it moves. Okay. But it will go all the way to the right and just will go to the infinity. Now, but just a straight movement is not that fun. Let's add some advanced movement. We will have variables speed x, speed y, and direction coefficients. With every update function call, we will change the x position of our logo with the speed x, and we will add, actually this is some math just to change the direction of our image. Just I won't go a little deep into that because of the time. Now the image just moves straight to the bottom right. But it will go to the infinity. Now let's make it collide with the bounds. For that, in the update function, we will check if the logo's position is equal or more than 800, or less or equal to 0. We will change the speed x we will multiply it with -1, so it will just change the sign. So before that, if it was moving to the right, as soon as it reaches the corner, it will switch the direction and it will now go to the left. And the same we'll do with the logo, but since our height of the game was 600, we'll check the Y position with the 600 and the X with 800. And now it collides with bounds and just moves. Just a spoiler, it will not hit the corner. And let's add a score counter. For that, we need a variable which we'll name score, and let's assign a 0 to it. And we will have a text variable to which we will assign the text object which will show our score. Now, with the create function, let's create the text. We will add the text to 10-10 position, and we will add the text score, which will contain the score, our actual score in it, and the font size will be 32, and we will have our score in the top left corner. And let's add a little interactivity. In order to add interactivity, we need to set the object interactive, which we'll do by calling the set interactive function. And with every pointer down event, we will increase the score and we will update the score with the new score. Now, let's add a little actions to the interactivity, because just clicking the image and getting the score is not that fun. Now, every time we click the image, it will change its position randomly from 0 to 800 in x-axis and from 0 to 600 in y-axis. And it will also change the direction and the angle by which it will move. And now, whenever we click the image, our score increases and the image changes its position and direction and speed as well. This is the just very basic mechanism for any clicker game. You can make, by using this knowledge, you can make your different game, and by checking the game conference talks, you will understand how to make better games. And do you have any questions with all this? Okay, great. I have 1 minute, right? Alan made a tutorial on how to make the Flappy Bird game with Clear Canvas API. I promised him that I will make the Phaser 3 tutorial on how to make the Flappy Bird game. And actually, I have loaded some videos tonight, and by checking let's go back all the way to the first slide. Tonight I will add the link to the Sorry. If you check this website, which I consider my portfolio, even though I didn't use any CSS or anything, just a pure HTML, tonight I will add the link to the tutorials. Tutorial is not complete yet because I'm going to improve and make something which will look like the actual Flappy Bird game. So if you are interested, you can check the website in the evening. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.